gives me great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Audi Mumbai West to dive right into the auto industry 2.0, the second coming post-COVID, or as we slowly emerge from COVID. How perhaps the industry is looking to reposition itself. What are the new trends that are coming to the fore with everything now being digital, service, delivery, drives coming to your doorstep? What are some of the launches perhaps that we're looking forward to ahead of festive season? And are we going to manage to see, some amount of cheer as the year comes to a close? It gives me great pleasure to welcome on board our panelists today. And this is a panel that comprises of some of the most experienced names in the auto industry. So who better to really give us expert insight, perspective on really what the way forward is. We've got joining us on the show today, Nikunj Sanghi, the chairman at the Automotive Skills Development Council and also formerly with FADA. Mr. Sanghi, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Vinay Pipersania, an auto industry veteran who's also been writing in great detail about some of the trends that he's seen unfolding. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from him today. Vinay, thank you for joining us as well.
Oh, thank you, Abha, and very nice to see my old partners in crime. It's always a pleasure.
Very true.
Who's a global communications leader, strategic advisor with an expertise in this space. So great to have you on board, Deepthi.
Hi, Abha, and hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here.
Khyati Modi, an international racer of great repute, who, as Renuka was just mentioning, has a unique perspective as well and an ear to the ground with all that's happening in the auto industry. Joining us from Dubai today. Thanks for being with us, Khyati.
Thank you for having me aboard.
Okay. And of course, our moderator for today is Renuka Kriplani, who all of you know is, of course, the executive editor, video content at Autocar India, and someone who we have been watching on screens and admiring for a very long time, watching her test drive all those amazing cars. So before I hand over to Renuka, I'd also like to say a big thank you to Mr. Modi, who's also going to be with us on the panel today, who's also the reason we've managed to put all of this together. So Gautam Modi of the Modi Group of Krishiv Industries, Managing Director. Thanks so much for joining us, Mr. Modi.
Thank you, Abha, and everybody.
Thank you, Abha. Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Modi, once again for getting us all together, because I think a lot of us want to talk about this subject. We've been thinking about it, we've been writing about it, but now we finally have the forum to speak about it. So thanks for giving us this forum. And I think for the rest of us guys, actually a good time to be having this conversation, because last month pretty much saw a turnaround for the auto industry. August saw a 19% rise year on year. But let's not forget that's also possibly because, last year, 19%, last year, August was probably one of the worst months for the auto industry. But this time around, we've seen it turn around. We've seen, a change coming in the auto industry. And so it's a great time for us to be having this conversation. Is it really 2.0? Have we turned around? And I think the best way to, kick off this conversation is with who else but person on ground right there dealing with it. Mr. Modi, you've been selling cars. Have you seen customers now coming back into showroom? Have they been really coming back and looking at cars and buying cars? Are we turning around?
I personally feel now this COVID thing has slightly slowed down and the people are coming. Balki it has improved our walk-in and the people in the showrooms, and really we have a very good sale in last month. We have a very good booking. I feel COVID as such is gone. People forget it as one flu, and now we have a medicine. So lot of things is, previously people are worried for COVID. If that will happen, we will die or something. Now that is gone. So now because of the public transports are not available, people don't prefer to go in the share mobility. So start buying it out. This is in general, and I personally feel it is one of the very good month last month where we have already done quite good business than the previous year. We will see another trend in the premium car segment where the ticket size has increased. The people who are actually where the lower premium, lower side of the models are not selling, but upper side of models are selling. This is the change which we have seen in the industry.
Yeah, I think that really is true. I think, Indian resilience and all these people out there who are watching us and logged on today have to be actually congratulated for the way, India just kind of pulls up its socks and moves on from every crisis that strikes us. It is still a difficult time. It is still a troubled time, and I think people still have to be careful. But I'm glad to see that the auto industry is bouncing back. And Nikun sir, you've been a part of FADA and the Dealers Association, and what's the sentiment on the dealer side of it? Do they really see, because I know they've faced a lot of challenges, 3 months, massive overheads, and no people coming in to buy cars. It must have been a difficult time. Do we have Nikun sir with us?
I think he may have.
We need to unmute you, Nikun sir. Yeah.
So definitely an extremely difficult time. I mean, I've been in this industry for 4 decades, and I can't even imagine doing no business for almost 3 months. Zero business, zero revenue, with businesses closed. I think something which we had not envisaged, something which we had not planned, and obviously it has added to a lot of our overheads, like you rightly said. And to get out of this will definitely take some time. August has been good. It's been very good, and but I would still want to treat with caution. So because if you see the number of COVID cases which are going up, and if you see the regional lockdowns which are happening, which are more at the whims of district authorities or state authorities, and unless I think all this is stopped, lockdowns are stopped, people need to move on with life. And I think if that what's happened, then the festival season should be good, led by rural demand. And I think rural demand is really, really picking up. And I can see a lot of movement in entry level, both Hero and Maruti. I think Maruti has done exceptionally well in terms of numbers. Hyundai has been phenomenal. With all its launches, with all its new products, I think they've just got the right product mix. And even at the price point at which they are selling their vehicles, they have a waiting list. And I think that speaks volumes of the product strategy of Hyundai.
Yeah, I think, also similarly, so for Kia, who on one product really selling and right up there. But Vinay, that's been a trend that earlier on in this year in January, we were seeing SUV. It was the big trend. Everything was all about SUVs. Do you think that sort of is now going to change, and we're going to see entry-level cars and maybe sedans make a bit of a comeback with this, strange time in the world that we've seen? Do you think that trend will change, and do you think that's going to change in the auto industry?
So, the way I look at the industry, they are basically, especially in India, it's very oligopolic. So you actually have 2 main players who are really determining to a large extent what models will be on offer. So if you actually look at the way planning is done in the auto industry, and I'll talk about it from an OEM perspective, and then I'll talk about it from a dealer's perspective. There's a lag. There's a huge lead time between how the OEMs plan their models and how they actually reach the dealership, and then what is actually available for retail. So what you're seeing right now, this SUV trend, is not something new. It was something that was predicted almost a year ago, and that's where the launch of all these compact SUVs started. It's not just SUVs, they're crossovers. It's the styling, and it's the whole ground clearance, and it's the way that the utility of those vehicles has now really caught on as the vehicle that offers the best value in terms of both utility, in terms of aspirations, as well as in terms of all the features that are now getting loaded on with it. So what you're seeing now is a shift more from the diesel vehicles that used to be earlier now to petrol. Now what you're also beginning to see is that there's going to be a bigger lead time as the automakers have to change this mix towards what the customer is now demanding post-COVID. And that's going to take at least another 3-4 months. That's the kind of lead time. What COVID has actually done is that it has upset the whole supply chain. And what you're going to see also is that it's going to take at least another 2-3 months before all this will clear out. And then we are able to offer sort of models that would be more aligned with the customer's demand. And that's why you're going to see this waiting list. So what we saw in January was a lot of new launches. What we saw moving forward was the demand for SUVs picking up and a shift from diesel to petrol, given the operating costs and given that the prices of these fuels are beginning to get closer, and the deal and the OEMs getting caught with COVID with the supply chain mixed up. So what we've seen is dealers now at the ground level, all these stocks getting run out. The replenishment is beginning to happen. And if the two players, Hyundai and Maruti, are up to speed and the supply chain is up to speed, then that's 80% of the issue almost. We will see that recovery. It's going to be the other smaller players and the other fragmented players that are going, the rest 10-15%, that are scrambling right now to change their mix, given their volumes and given the demand that's possibly being taken and sucked in by Maruti and Hyundai right now. So
yeah, I think it is, and it's going to be a changing trend. And I think we already have some questions coming in. So maybe we'll take that question. Maybe Dipti can help us answer this, because it's a lot of sentiment and question of branding, and that's right up your alley, Dipti. There's a lot of sentiment about brands like that are not Indian at this moment, especially from across the border, where people are not wanting it, wanting things to come in. But do you think this kind of sentiment is going to lead people to buying more Indian cars? Do you think that everybody's going to become, there's this whole Deshbhakt feeling, but do you think it's going to actually push people and drive people to buy India-made brands a lot more?
I think what's the beauty of India is that it's democracy and people have the opportunity to raise the voice. But also, I think, let's not forget, people also have short memories. So I think sometimes things like these are flavor of the month, flavor of the week. And of course, in the recent what we have seen is COVID, to the tension on, India-China fronts has made people think like that. And yes, they are maybe questioning, challenging, but I think in the end, what's going to win is the product, right? If the product is good, product's going to sell. I think whatever branding, marketing you do, and having done this for many, many years, you cannot sell a bad product, and a good product does sell. So branding does help it leverage and bring the whole story out. But in the end, it's the product which is the hero. And what I think is going to change at this point in time, big time, we all talk about like Auto 2.0, but it's going to be Digital 3.0 to my mind. It's going to be leapfrogging, on the way you put everything which is centric to the consumer. I think
we're seeing digital launches. Things that we've never seen before. We're seeing all communication digital. We're seeing manufacturers make shorter videos, tighter videos, and come out more with, everything on digital platform. So is that the way forward, do you think?
Absolutely. I think both, we can't forget offline will continue to exist, but at the moment, it is definitely skewed towards digital because the consumer has fear and it's going to move in multiple folds, right? It's just not about you can take a test drive at home, but even the experience that you're going to build with the customer is going to be so much important. And that's what I meant by Digital 3.0, the augmented realities, the VR, experience the car sitting from your home. Those kind of things will be very important. And I think the dealers in this place will have to step up the game. So it's just not the OEM who's, responsible for the brand, but even dealers will need to bring possibly innovations to how engage with the customers, because they are the first point to the consumer, right? They're right up there. So what they do, it's all going to be a big ecosystem, right? It's going to be an ecosystem of OEMs and dealers combined thrust together to really get to that consumer with the brand. And that's going to be a story for a long time.
Yeah. Questions coming in about Audi, and I think maybe I need to answer them instead of Mr. Modi. Someone's asking about the Q2. Yes, the Q2 will be coming in soon. I think Mr. Modi is smiling over there because he's going to have more cars to sell. So yeah, Audi is going to be bringing in cars. I think they are also upcoming, and electric vehicles. Look, everybody I think is stepping into the EV space, and I think Audi will also, you know, they have the e-tron and everything, and I think COVID generally has delayed plans for India. So while we would have seen a lot of cars already by now here, I think a lot of the launches have been delayed, to answer the question, you know, put forward to us from someone that's come in about the Q2 launching. But generally, we were talking about dealerships, and Nikunj sir, do you see that changing with the dealers? Are dealers now restructuring themselves? Is that the new way forward? And do you think online buying is picking up? Do dealers now prefer online platforms? Because again, COVID, infrastructure cost was always something that dealers always grappled with. It was always a problem for dealer, you know, coping with that high infrastructure cost, because the price of land in India has always been expensive. So this may be the way to reboot, rethink and rethink a dealership, maybe a smaller dealership, just display cars if someone wants to come and see them. But, you know, everything else online. Do you think that's the way forward? And is that what's changing?
So definitely digital is the way forward. And I think digital will play a huge role in reducing dealer costs. So, and not just the size of the infrastructure, it is the number of salespeople that you require. It's also about the kind of inventory that you keep, because with the kind of digital connect that we have, with the kind of logistics that we have, the kind of IT systems that we have, I don't think dealers would be required to stock 60 days, 90 days, and so on and so forth. And I think during this COVID period, one thing that we have really learned is that you can turn around your inventory even with a small number. And, so I think digital is definitely the way forward, but I also have something to do with real life. And so I think a lot of you would have attended marriages in these last 6 months, which were virtual and which were digital. Did you enjoy those marriages? Did you really experience the marriage the way you would? And I think it's the same way with cars. Buying a car is a life event. And I think the satisfaction that you get out of that physical experience, I'm sure you would have seen Tapsi Pannu getting her JLR and what Landmark was able to do about how the vehicle was delivered. Can you do that digitally? So come on, believe it. Physical is going to remain, dealerships are going to remain, and I think it's a combination of physical and digital, and what we are now used to being called phygital. But digital will play a huge role in the first part of the purchase experience of the customers. Dealers will need to be very, very equipped in terms of being digital, and they no longer need to depend only on OEMs. Unless they are digitally present in a very, very big way, unless they are the first to be noticed, unless their response time is the fastest, I don't think they can exist in this business that is coming up. But like I told you, it's going to be a phygital presence of dealerships to reduce costs and to increase efficiencies.
Yeah, that's also great. A lot of questions coming in on EVs. You know, people are talking about EVs. Is that the way forward? Is India really ready? Do we have the infrastructure? I don't think so, but I'm going to talk to, I think, Vinay, who's probably written a lot of stuff on EVs. And you know, do you think EVs are really going to take off in India?
You know, that question is really one of economics. And I don't think it's so much of the environment, or it's just that the fact that it's electric. The fact is that unless the prices of these, especially in four-wheelers, comes down to parity with the existing cars, we really are not going to see a popularity of that. No doubt it gets a lot of news, it gets a lot of attention because it is a new technology, and that's definitely going to take its time, and it's going to be something that's going to also have to be proven out. So what we're seeing is that they're only on the very, very high-end vehicles at this moment. Why? Because it must have range, because it must have the features, and it must have the battery, and the battery is where almost 40% of the cost is. So as cars are concerned, we're still going to see these in the hundreds and maybe in the thousands at best for the next 4 or 5 years. In the case of two-wheelers, it's a different story. two-wheelers, given the subvention and given the kind of support that is being given by the government, smaller battery size, which keep the cost low. There's a swapping strategy that can work very conveniently on such transportation options. Plus, their range is also within the kind of cost structure that can make it economical. The prices are still high, but if the subsidy was supposed to come down even further, we should be able to see a big shift of that happening. So it will happen in phases. It will start with two-wheelers. It will start with three-wheelers next, which is more of a commercial and where the operating costs can be maintained, and where if the battery swapping is sort of available and is fairly effective, we can see that. But for cars, it's going to take some while. And wherever we will see some volumes and some early adopters, it will be in the premium end, just like we were talking about the Audi models, as well as in the Porsche models, the Taycan, and maybe in some of the other big SUVs that will be able to provide that range, and where the cost, the profile of the customer isn't that much so about the cost of that initial vehicle.
Yeah, I'm going to take a couple of questions here and feel free to answer them. I think probably Vinay, Dipti would be able to answer this, and maybe Khyati could give us her personal perspective on, do you think automatic cars are the flavor, and would you be choosing an automatic over a manual? Khyati, as a personal driver, someone who lives and drives in cities in Mumbai, do you think that's the trend, and does that make life easier for the consumer?
Well, if you look from a broader perspective, yes, a lot of people prefer automatic cars, because the traffic is horrible, it's ferocious, you don't want to keep on changing gears and everything. But personally, I do not like automatic cars so much. I would prefer a manual car, because when I actually buy a car, I'm actually thinking, okay, can I take it to a racetrack? Can I take it to off-roading? That's my first criteria. So for that, automatic cars do not really work. So personally, I would want a manual car. But again, the people who actually race and rally are like hardly 1% of the population. Majority of the population, I think they would prefer automatic cars.
Yeah, so Khyati, your industry has been affected as well. Motorsports plays a large part of, and a lot of manufacturers were getting into racing. There were manufacturer racing groups, and all of that has come to a standstill. So largely even that aspect has been affected by the current situation. Is it reviving? Is it coming back? Do you see it starting? I think today there was an announcement by Sports Ministry that they are going to start up sports again. So is it looking hopeful? Is that also turning around?
So the first people who are affected by the car sales somehow are racing people, because what happens if the sales are not enough? Even big manufacturers like Maruti have pulled out from the racing background. I think last year they did not sponsor any of the rallies. So one of the biggest rallies called Raid the Himalaya was called off. Desert Storm was happening on a much lower scale than what it usually happens. So things are hampering for us as well. But Volkswagen has taken a much more higher stand. They've come into racing and rally. They've filled the gap that Maruti has left in a way. And then coming up with an E-series and everything.
So there's difference.
There is. And
you see that turning around as well. We have another question.
I think it will. It will. And today itself, the new rally calendar has been announced. That's starting from November. So I think things are slowly changing out here.
So we have another question. Do you think, Hitesh Sharma's asked us, do you think taxes that are taken in Indian automobiles will reduce in the upcoming years? Well, today, I think there was a Siam convention. People were online and, it was pretty much said clearly that if at all, there are lots of industries in line looking for tax reductions. And if at all, Mr. Jatikar said that if at all there are reductions, it will start from the lower end. Two-wheelers will be the priority. Then there will be public transport. So I think cars a long way to come. But, Mr. Sanghi, what's your perspective on this?
So I think I'm happy that finally the government has started saying that automobile is not sin, automobile is not luxury, even if it starts with two-wheelers. But I think it's a positive note. And if the shift takes place from not classifying automobiles as sin products or luxury products, they are now need-based. They are a way of life. So I think it's a good shift that the government has shown. I only hope, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed, that these are not only statements of intent and let it be only with two-wheelers to begin with, and let it be for a short while. But I think the mindset change in the government is a big positive step. I only hope it holds, and automobiles do get a relief, because automobiles ultimately almost contribute to 49% of the manufacturing GDP, 7.1% of the total GDP of the country. So what happens to automobiles actually makes a lot of difference to what happens to the economy. A good shift, a positive shift. Keep your fingers crossed.
Well, looking at August, we're hoping that it keeps that way and it keeps moving forward. Another question from Akshay Taj Bijay: how long before we see things like level 3 self-driving capability make it to the Indian market? Well, I mean, brands like Audi and their technology is ready. The capability is there, and we've seen global brands display it amply to us. The point is our infrastructure has to be ready, I think, and that isn't. Small things like lane assist, a lot of brands are bringing them in. We have them in cars. But when you don't have lane markings, the radars, the sensors, they can't pick up these things. And that's what the problems are to bringing higher levels of autonomy into driving in India. So I think our infrastructure is a little lagging behind for these systems to come. Also, and Vinay, I think can probably help me here in this conversation, is that I think for a long time, frequency which manufacturers were allowed to use for their radars was limited. So there was only a certain amount of frequency that they could use. So only a certain amount, of technology could be brought into the market for that reason. But that is increasing. They have been allowed some more leeways, and which is why you're seeing manufacturers come in with higher and more, safety features in cars, which use radars and sensors as well. And so I think slowly, as the government regulation recognizes the need for it, I'm sure we can progress as well. Vinay, what's your thoughts on this?
No, and Renuka, your observations are absolutely right. The idea is that I think India will unfortunately lag behind the other countries in introduction of such technology, only because we are prioritizing some other aspects, at this moment. I think it's much more important to have safe cars. And the idea of safe, as you know, and safety, the kind of standards that we've started to adopt recently, dual airbags, ABS, those are fairly expensive investments already, and have raised the price of the cars. I don't think given the kind of taxation that we have and others, adding all these features are going to really start hurting the customer, and therefore it's going to be more, the vehicles are not going to be so accessible. So I think the high end will start offering them, and that's where they will start to become sort of mainstream. And only when they are scalable and when the technology has been standardized and available, then only will it come down onto the mainstream cars. So it's going to take some time. But with regards to autonomous and others, we've always had statements already that, because of the fact that it's such an employable part of employment, and that a lot of drivers and others are already, part of the economy that have to benefit by driving cars, trying to have autonomous cars at this point, I don't think it's going to get too much government policy support. So we'll have to wait, and there will be a lag, a pretty long lag between the rest of the world and India for this technology to finally come. There will be level 1, which is the park assist and others, but to level 3, level 4, I think that's going to be far away.
I remember being at a Bosch conference where, they've got the technology pretty much for self-driving cars ready. And I asked them, do you think this could ever come to India? And I think they laughed and they said, will Indian people ever remember not to cross the road where they're not supposed to? So those kind of, I think, challenges have to be overcome in our country long before we can see, hugely autonomous cars in India. Here's a question for you.
Renuka, I'm just going to butt into that and adding to Vinay's point. I think one thing which we all know is that there are 4 mega trends, right? So autonomy, connectivity, electrification, and shared mobility is globally being done. So even if the technologies are not coming here, a lot of all these manufacturers do take inputs about the markets as well. So, you know, when they're designing these technologies, their inputs and the engineers working out of India do feed in a lot of things. But again, yes, to the same point, that when it will be ready, when there's the ecosystem supported, infrastructure to taxation will be the point. But the good news is that when things like these are developed, you do know that India has a certain way, and sometimes those things are accounted in when somebody designs a technology or engineers things around that.
Yeah.
And I can add one more point, Renuka. One thing that's very positive is that most of the leading institutes of technologies are actually now developing courses for such technology to be able to provide it into India when the time is sort of appropriate. Right. So we are seeing all that happening, there's development, but when will it be actually in the hands of customers and products? That's going to be very much driven by policy. So I think that has to come together.
Yes, and I had a conversation with Mr. Sanghi as well very recently, you know, about ASDC now offering courses in robotics and, you know, other areas that, you know, the whole infrastructure, the ecosystem, if mechatronics, you know, it's all becoming a different, it's not just pure engineering plainly that gets you into the automotive world. So I think, you know, that is a big question about Reboot too as well, that maybe you could answer from the ASDC perspective, Sanghi sir, about employment. Because at one level we see dealers, you know, trying to go online digital, which will reduce employment to a certain rate. But at the other end, industry is changing, technology is changing. Do you see a new area of employment coming up there? Do you think that because of the way the world is now and because of people wanting, do you think India will see more manufacturers come here, more manufacturing bases being set up, more production coming here, even in the component sector, not only just the automotive? Do you think that will change?
It will, Renuka, and so India has a very, very rich demographic dividend. So I think you would have all heard that India has today got the youngest population, youngest working population anywhere in the globe. India also has this very big advantage of having the most qualified engineers anywhere in the world. Today, all technology companies, you name it, and they are either being headed by Indians or have a huge amount of workforce which comes from India. And I think recognizing that India has started talking about becoming manufacturing hub, not just for vehicles, but definitely for components. And I think components have made a huge inroads. In automobiles, we are becoming suppliers to the world, but I don't think we should be complacent about it, because if we need to be competitive, if we need to arrive, if we really need to replace China as the manufacturing hub for the world, I think what we definitely need to focus on is quality. And how does quality comes in? And I think quality will need to become a DNA, and the only way it can become a DNA is by skilling the right amount of people, and the right approach. They have to be first time right. They have to be focused on giving the best quality. So our entire skilling ecosystem needs to get aligned to the global skilling ecosystem. And once we have done that, I don't think there is anything stopping India from becoming the manufacturing hub for the world, not only in automobiles and components, but I think in capital goods as a whole. We have a long way to go, and I think that's where India will arrive. And I think we are focused on it, and we are driving towards that. I wish we could do it much faster than what we are doing.
Yeah.
Well, I think this industry, and I think there was a question on the challenges between moving from BS4 to BS6. So I think kudos to an industry that took it upon themselves to meet the deadline, face the challenges. It's not an easy one to jump. And I know that, you know, a lot of engine and component manufacturers had to push themselves to every limit to sort of make this deadline, meet it, and be here. So yeah, I think this industry can do what's possible. But while we're on the topic of quality, there's a question from Nandaditya Swami. This is actually for Dipti. This is for you. Since you work with Ford, he says that Ford offers such great quality when compared to brands like Maruti, Suzuki, etc. And I have to tell you all that Vinay was also once a part of Ford. So maybe both of you can answer this. But, you know, still they see smaller market share in a country like India. So what is it that really, you know, prevents or challenges brands? What are the challenges for these brands to actually get a bigger share of the market?
Oh,
Vinay,
that.
yeah, you should take it first. I can add on.
You know, yeah, I mean, that's a conversation where I think we can have a whole webinar on that itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you, as I think I mentioned earlier, India is a very difficult and challenging market for various reasons. And no doubt it's a very demanding customer. And the customers, you know, we want to do the best to offer the best in technology and the latest there. But trying to bring affordability with the cost structures and, you know, the taxations, it does always become a challenge to offer a product that can compete with some of the other ones that have already had an early start you know, working versus investments being made at current prices. So we, you know, trying to strategically price, you can do it for a few years, but until you don't get scale, it's very difficult. So I think the real challenge is that India continues to remain very oligopolic. There are a few players that have a very large share, and that very large share really causes a lot of factors very difficult. So you don't focus on, you know, you can't focus on everything. You'll have to focus on niches. So I think that is what companies like Ford and companies like other multinational players, what we started to do, and I think is the perfect strategy moving forward in the playbook, is to make cars for exports from India. And I think that's a very strong positive outcome of our global players being here, doing productions, because we are demonstrating that it is possible with all the factors here, with the workforce that we have, with the kind of even cost structure that we have, we can still make cars competitive when we offer them with full features and full standards that are equivalent to the world. It is very much possible. But the cost structure is what, you know, the pricing structure is what makes it very difficult to be able to make sort of a sustainable business equation. So that's really the challenge. The fact that more than 80% of cars, you know, made by Ford, made by some of the other global MNCs are exported is a demonstration and a proof point of that. So, and I think what you're seeing even in the commercial vehicle sectors, similarly to some of the latest trucks with all the safety features and all the different connected features that are being offered are also being primarily made for exports. So India can do it. I think it needs a level playing ground for various reasons, and it also needs to encourage the use and adoption of such features for mainstream vehicles to make them popular, and also to change the whole concept of just having mainstream cars, but having fairly well-featured cars with quality, which are at world-class levels. Deepti, your thoughts?
So absolutely, Vinay. And the other point just to add to that is, it's also for brands like Ford, like when we were working together, it was very, very important for us to get that quality right for the reasons that you just said. And you have to prove in the market. And the good news is that one product can do it, right? So Figo was a game changer. And whatever we learned from that perspective, we were getting deeper to really understand the consumer so deeply and so well. And that then replicated success with EcoSport. So I think it's a journey sometimes that the brand does have to take. And yes, the opportunity of more brands and more things coming to light will be that. And I'm sure that, you know, people have heard about how Ford is working now even with Mahindra together in partnership, right? So they are addressing the challenges that they had, and they're going to move forward to bring more products, you know, but again, holding things like quality, sustainability, you know, fuel efficiencies, those key parameters which the consumers really want, and at the right price. So yes, that's going to happen.
So we have an interesting question here, and I think we can ask Khyati that. Do you see EVs coming into the world of rallying? I'm just going to see who asked that question. There's so many of them pouring in, so sorry, I'm just scrolling down. But someone's asking, Khyati, do you see EVs in the world of rallying? Well, I'm going to answer that first. We've already seen a Formula E series of racing, so definitely there is, you know, in the racing world there is. But you see EVs coming into rallying anytime soon?
Well, I think with the further advancement in the technology and everything, why not? If Formula E can come in, why not something in rallying as well? I think definitely there is a market for it.
Well, I think Audi has already made strides. They're doing a lot of racing, a lot of EVs in racing, and I think Audi's made huge strides in that sense.
In Europe, actually.
Yes, and broken some records as well. So yeah, a lot of already EV noise and buzz in, and let me tell you, electric vehicles, there's no build-up of power. It's instant torque. So just remember, getting to that 0 to 100 is far easier in an electric car than it is in other cars. So I absolutely don't see why not. I think most definitely. And I think, EVs are also making the stride. A lot of people think originally they thought they were soulless, lifeless, and how would EVs distinguish themselves from one another, which is another question that someone has asked over here. That, in terms of EVs, how would they be different, and how would, brands distinguish one another from themselves? And I think I've already seen so many differences. I remember when, getting into the first EV and thinking, oh my God, this sounds like a washing machine. But, now you're getting into EVs that actually give you the feel of driving, whether it's an SUV, whether it's four-wheel drive, there's all kinds of technologies coming forward. So, would any one of you like to take that on and answer it? I definitely think it is the future. It is the technology that has taken the alternative fuel step the furthest. We saw hydrogen cell, we saw, everything coming up. Initially, people were exploring a lot of different technologies, but EV seems to have made the biggest stride forward, and I think is the easiest one to implement, despite its cost, resistances and cost problems.
Renuka, I'll just take that one in, having lived in US and experienced some of the vehicles there, right? The Focus Electric is a great example, right?
Yeah.
So, and it does feel like just the car that you really want, but a lot of other factors into it, the miles it can done, how quickly you can charge. It bottom downs to that infrastructure, right? You're in the office and you're charging it down in your parking lot, right? Those are the elements which really make these products go, and people rave and love it for that perspective. It's just that it has to come into a system and into an infrastructure where all this is possible. So yes, wherever there are electric vehicles, they are equally loved and equally liked, for the features and the comforts and the conveniences that they bring.
There's also a question from Shrenik, and an interesting one that I love to debate, especially in a country like ours. Is it true that EVs don't actually reduce pollution in the larger picture? Now, this is a big topic, and I can see Vinay instantly smiling over there because he's waiting to dive into this discussion.
Yeah.
My take on it is yes, it should be looked at from source to disposal of batteries. It shouldn't be looked at only in the isolation of on-road performance. So I think, yes, people do have to look at the larger picture. There is a growing worry of how batteries are going to be disposed of. In our country, where coal is a large source of energy, so is it really that clean? So these are questions that one must think of and answer and resolve before stepping into a huge EV future. I definitely think so. What's your take on that?
Oh, absolutely, Renuka. And it is as they say, it's all about the raw material all the way down to how it is recycled. And unfortunately, in a country like India, where our power generation is still to a large portion, coal-based, it's really going to generate more and more pollution because if more power has to be generated for this consumption. So just imagine all that fuel that we were using otherwise is now going to get replaced by electricity. And that electricity is going to use a similar fossil fuel, coal, to generate the same thing, but just convert it into. So it's not really going to add up because the pollution will still go on because the original source is still coal. So we have a ways to go. Yes, you have to have alternative sources of energy, whether it's nuclear or whether it's solar or whether it's going to be even wind-based. We have to find a scalable ecosystem which would enable that power to be stored, and that storage power will then be able to provide the overall sustainable equation of a greener environment. So yes, it will take some time. I think if we take the example of Norway, we take the example of some of the other European countries where the EVs have started to make a difference only because their power generation is actually being through alternate sources. So we will need to balance that out. So buying an electric vehicle really isn't going to do much for the environment at this moment, but it will definitely do a lot for the quality of air within the local areas where they're starting to change, and the mix of vehicles between ICE and electric vehicles will start to make a difference. So you will see it in clusters. You will not see it nationally, but you start seeing it in clusters if it is very efficiently managed with battery charging stations, which are solar charged maybe, or which have other wind-based solutions that are going to be powering the grid. So we have a ways to go, and it needs a lot of support from a lot of experts and a lot of other stakeholders to make a strategy that has everybody in it together and does not look at it isolated only into their particular operations. It has to be a very integrated strategy for the country.
Mr. Modi, are dealers really ready for EVs? I know we've been seeing this, but it requires a whole rejig of the back-end infrastructure. It requires re-educating all your staff, service staff. So are dealers ready for EVs? And do you think the consumer is ready for EVs because you see them firsthand on the shop floor?
Yeah, Renuga, I feel dealers can be ready earlier, but our infra is not ready. Our government infra charging stations are not ready, not that comfortable. We are selling EVs, but we find this problem because the electric companies are not providing on the cheaper rates electricity. The charging stations are not there. So and that's why consumers are also not that comfortable to take this at this juncture. It will take time. It will take time.
Especially considering, I think, the higher cost. Most countries made the transition to EV because there were subsidies, because government subsidized EVs, gave benefits for EVs, and I think that's why consumers took to EVs. So do you think that really is the biggest need of the hour just now?
Yes, definitely yes. Because the prices equivalent to IC engines, I feel it is somewhere in the higher side. So people who wants to take EV also slightly worried about the price and not buying at this juncture.
Gio Abraham has asked an interesting question. Is four-wheeler really a sin good? Should the government take a look into GST rates and work towards increasing the sale of four-wheelers? Well, I think, Gio, we did discuss that. And I think Mr. Sanghi's put his hand up there. Yes, I want to answer this one.
It is a...
So I guess, yes, the government definitely needs to look at, and I think if you just go into the mathematics of GST, you will realize that if GST is brought down and if that is the trigger to increase the sales, the net revenue to the government is going to be much, much higher than what it is today. And let me give you a very small example of what Goa did. I think what Goa did was to reduce the registration tax, the RTO, the one-time tax on cars for about 6 months. They've reduced it to half. And the revenues that the Goa government got were almost twice they would have otherwise got. And I think that's an example that shows that if it becomes a trigger to demand, it's going to fill the coffers of the government, the revenue shortages that we are going to talk about, because automobiles again contribute to the biggest revenue in terms of GST collections. So I think government definitely needs to, as long as government doesn't consider automobiles as sin, it doesn't consider it as a luxury, I'm sure it can let it be the backbone of any economy. And I think all economies across the world have proved that wherever the auto industry is strong, the economy is strong.
I completely agree, and especially taking into consideration the times that we're in, where people are having to rely so much on personal mobility because there isn't the required public infrastructure, and it's an unexpected situation. Personal mobility has taken the fall, and we see more and more people for their own safety wanting personal mobility now. I think government has to require that it's no longer a sin good. It is actually becoming a necessity for people. And I think that definitely is the need of the hour. So another question that I'm going to take on the topic of infrastructure, especially I think as far as EVs are concerned, Charanpreet has asked, are there players, private players getting into it? Are we relying on government initiatives. Is that what the hindrance is? Is everybody waiting? Well, I think it's pretty much a chicken and egg story. Everybody's kind of waiting for one thing to develop and then nothing's really moving. It needs the required subsidies. It requires input from government. I know we did a story recently where we went around with an EV and we went with an app that's supposed to identify the EV charging stations, and we found a lot of the EV charging stations either weren't there, closed down, damaged. A lot of the owners said, hey, who's paying for the electricity? We suddenly realized the station is set up at ours, but my electricity bills have gone sky high. So a lot of this, I think there are a lot of policy things that need to be sorted out before all of this can come into place and private players can actually start setting up charging stations and doing things. Vinay, you probably have an outlook on this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's basically always about consumers, right? It's like I need customers. If I have a charging station, I need electric vehicles who are going to be my consumers, right? Somewhere it's the chicken and egg. Where will the volumes come from? And I think a perfect start, we have to do it in a very spaced manner. So I think, as we rightly before, two-wheelers are going to be the first because we can, the parity of cost between ICE and electric vehicles can be best. The range can be managed. It will start with that. Create charging stations which would provide a support to this group. Once we have those people getting used to electric vehicles, when they move up to a car, they'd be used to and they'll be looking for an electric vehicle. So somewhere the government why are we asking for government support and investment? Because somebody will have to strategically make that investment without having returns for years to come. And that is why it's important that it's a public sort of support rather than a private one. The private one, the return on investment are so large, and the cost of money, even after COVID, is going to be far larger and far riskier. The only way it could ever get supported if there is a public support. So unless there is that, I don't think it's going to really happen very quickly. The volumes will only increase when car makers started on high end, just the way Tesla had done. You get the high end vehicles, they create their own infrastructure because they're able to fund it through the extra cost. And when that group of people start becoming larger and larger and larger, then the costs start coming down through scale. But in a country like India, if you don't have that support, it's not going to happen within the next 2 years or even to a decade. So without government support, it's very unlikely to happen.
Can I just jump in here for a second, please?
Yeah, so Kathy, I think...
Sorry.
Yes, so I think the government support has been changing. Like, I think initially when F1 came, F1 was considered as a form of entertainment and not a sport. But just yesterday or day before, the sports minister has announced that even F1 or that even motorsport is going to be like one of the integrated sports of India and has classified that. So I think the government policies are changing. So we're looking at it a different way now. That government will be supporting EVs as well and reducing subsidies.
I think possibly that, so sorry, Nikun sir, you had something to say before I came.
I was just saying, please look at Arthur. So what Arthur Energy is trying to do, of course, it's in two-wheeler spaces.
Correct.
Giving the entire ecosystem, so not just making the vehicle, they're also making charging stations. They're in fact partnering with private sector in creating charging stations wherever they're selling their vehicles. And I think Arthur Energy has actually changed the game on how two-wheelers can be sold and EVs in two-wheelers can be sold. They are high-end, like Tesla, but they have the right technology and I think the right input to make them possible. They're also giving the customer comfort in terms of creating the right kind of charging infrastructure where those vehicles are going to move. And I think somebody needs to take a leaf out of what Arthur Energy is trying to do and probably do it in four-wheelers too.
Absolutely. There has been actually a slew of manufacturers that imported bikes into India and set up zones where they would, have e-mobility. I think the problem there really was the fact that the manufacturing wasn't happening here. So with the current crisis, all of that has folded up, come to a close because supporting that kind of a business model just didn't work. So I think people, again, I come back to the fact that that local manufacturer, locally things need to start moving on this front, and locally we need to start making a step in this direction for it to also get the steam and the pace. But then again, that requires some support from government, I assume.
Yeah, and Renuka, just to add to that, like we talk about the city of tomorrow and urban, how countries like US are working on things. That's where the governors, it's like a city project that starts to happen really, where the DC governor comes forward and they start piloting those things together. And I think where they create a connected dot is technology. So private players is, the technology players and others all having the skin in the game to really change the city of tomorrow. I think that's where the opportunity and some learnings can be, where it's a true partner, public, private partnership that can result to changes like this, which we really yearn to see.
We have a question from Ashwin Kumar. This is for you, Mr. Modi. Do we expect any, have you seen BS6 change? Because with BS6 and diesel cars going and more of them becoming turbo petrol, do you see, demand kind of dropping because of diesel cars disappearing, even from Audi, some of the Audi range?
See, diesel demand has gone down drastically, but that will fulfill by the petrol demand. We are seeing the increase in the demand at present. It is not that we are facing a problem in the selling. The numbers are going up.
So you see people taking to petrol very happily, and you see people, enjoying the petrol perspective as well.
If you see now, the price difference between petrol and diesel also has a very narrowed down. So I don't think so people are worried on this. I've seen in some manufacturer where the low average petrol car also selling well. People can adjust it that.
Well, we've seen one of the largest shareholder of the pie have no diesels in their range, and they're still selling cars, and they had a very good month. So that speaks volumes for that as well. Vinay, any outlooks on that, and Mr. Sanghi as well, because you're seeing it at the dealer level.
So I think diesel is not going anywhere. I mean, diesel is going to remain, and I think if you see the rural side of the consumers, I think they still depend on diesel much more than in spite of the fact that now diesel and petrol are priced almost similarly. Diesel vehicles, the initial cost of acquisition is much, much higher. But I guess the efficiency, the power, the feel of a diesel vehicle is extremely different as compared to a petrol. But yes, diesel is going to go down when it comes to a ratio, and petrol will become, or gasoline will become, a more acceptable fuel than diesel is. And I guess as we move on the efficiency ladder, as we move on the emission ladder, I think petrol will become the preferred fuel as compared to diesel.
Well, we're strong believers in the diesel engines, and we still think they have some time, and they're still going strong, and consumers still want them. And I think some manufacturers are betting hard on diesel as well, and keeping the trend going. Vinay, what's your take on this?
It's not easy for manufacturers to change gears. So they have been sort of, as I told you, plans for automotive companies are fairly long lead. And sometimes for over a year, they would have already committed to the kind of mix of petrol and diesel that they've had. They can't change that overnight. Clearly, it's up to the customer. If the customer will demand petrol, I don't think the manufacturers have a choice. They will have to provide that. It would mean also working with their suppliers and working along on their assembly lines and change to start to manage that kind of mix change. That's going to take some time, and that's going to take some rejigging of the manufacturing. So that's actually what we're seeing right now. But I think to the point that you made, yes, in some tier 2 towns and in villages, diesel may still be there. It's just because the storage of the fuel, petrol is far more inflammable, not easy to transport, but diesel is. Those will be the factors for diesel, just like it is in Europe and other countries where the price of diesel and petrol are not really regulated like the way they have been over here earlier. So we will see that same global sort of stability in the mix of petrol and diesel eventually in the next few years, when the manufacturers get the mix and the planning and the suppliers absolutely in line with the customer demand.
Sir Nikun, sir, this is a question for you from Rajat Agarwal. Do you think mechatronic engineers will have a better chance in the automotive industry for being employed?
Absolutely. So I guess it's not just about emission standards, it's also about the safety regulations which are coming in. It's about the CAFE norms which are going to come in 2022, not very far off. And I think to do all that, mechatronics is the future, and not just in manufacturing, but also at dealerships. So even in dealerships, unless we have what we call not just technicians who can handle mechanical, but technicians who are equally proficient in handling mechatronics. And mechatronics is definitely the future. They'll be far more employable, and obviously they'll get much better money than pure engineers who are either electric or mechanical. So mechatronics is the future in terms of career.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is an interesting question. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Vinay.
Sorry, I can just add one more point there. The mechatronics has been there for a long time, and now we're seeing more and more of those features getting down into mainstream cars. So it's going to be there even in higher range and in higher population of vehicles for repairs and servicing. So yes, that is going to be a very high demand skill. And I think the opportunity for people who have that skill is really going to be important for adding value to dealership operations and to the customer, capability and that they would expect at dealerships. So you're doing the right thing by studying mechatronics.
Yeah, and I also see the fact that, a lot of manufacturers want to now set up their R&D bases in India. They find that it is a good source of development. These bases obviously work in tandem with the global R&D centers. But I think we've seen that happen a lot. So I think there's plenty of scope for it. It's an interesting question to add on in a similar vein from Vamshida Reddy. He's from a family of pre-owned car businesses. And now with the current situation, pre-owned cars coming to take the fore, he's also an aspiring automobile engineer. So which future of his should he go for? And what do you think would be the next best thing for him to do? I'm sure the family wants you to go into the pre-owned car business, and it definitely has a very different future now than it did a while ago. I think post-COVID, the pre-owned car business also has changed. And I think maybe Mr. Modi would like to also comment on that, or Mr. Sanghi.
Yeah, pre-owned car business is post-COVID has increased drastically. I can say we have, with the process of time, it will be somewhere like US and everywhere where there are 30-40% or 50% of business is pre-owned car. So this is how it is happening. So pre-owned car
you've been in the US. Yeah, Dipti, you've also been in the US as well, right? So when you were there and, was this a big trend that you had to kind of look after?
Absolutely, and because I think the pre-owned are so affordable there, like, even a student who can just pay like $100 a month kind of a thing can afford the car, right? And the other part is that even the maintenance of these cars wasn't a big issue. I think something which a perception an Indian consumer still tries to has to tackle is about, if I'm taking a pre-owned car, how's going to be the maintenance, what's the life forward? And I think that's the bridge we have to do here in India to educate, frankly, of that opportunity. And I think as we just discussed about it, there is a definitely shift that's going to be happening, because personal mobility is going to be the center focus for next couple of years, especially after COVID.
There's another reason, Renuka, why used cars is going to be, or pre-owned cars is going to become important. As the penetration improves, as the penetration vehicle ownership improves, I think unless you have trade-in facilities, so if I want to change my car, I will definitely want a trade-in facility at the dealer which I am going to do business with. So I think pre-owned cars is going to become increasingly important, and I'm absolutely confident that India will soon reach exactly the proportions that US talks about. So in US, it is 4 used cars to every 1 new car. And I think India is already touching 1.2, 1.3. COVID has accelerated the scale of used car operations. And like I said, as the vehicle penetration improves, car ownership improves, used cars is going to be the future business.
Yeah, interesting comment from one of our viewers over here about wind energy and replacing coal energy. But I think that also there's a fact of solar energy in our country, which is largely neglected. I mean, I was in Korea recently, and you see outside everybody's home and window, even in their high-rise apartments, they have a little solar panel, and apparently a certain amount of their house has to be powered by solar energy, and they can only get a certain amount of electricity. And I think, with the kind of sunlight we have in our country, that's a hugely untapped source. And I think that's one way forward for us also to go to produce cleaner, greener energy for sure. Dipti's nodding away. I think she's seen a lot of solar energy production as well.
Yes, and I think there is this consciousness about now being well-being and health and those kind of things. So these things are bound to happen now. So as you rightly said, the opportunity is huge to look at these kind of alternate, energy, things that can happen here because the new millennials and the thinking and the mindset is changing as well. And I think it starts really from there.
Absolutely. I think many different aspects to look forward to in this auto industry. I mean, just to sum it up for all of us, I think we see EVs as an emerging trend, but it's still a long way away. I think Indian infrastructure has to catch up for us. We've seen a turnaround in the industry. We're seeing many launches. As a journalist, I know that I'm being asked to test drive cars every single day. I don't have a minute free. So it's a good sign for you guys out there because there's a host of launches coming up, new cars coming up on the road out there. As Nikun sir has rightly said, and Mr. Modi, that, we're seeing that second pre-owned cars is also going to become a large part of the Indian market. Technology is coming into the country. So I think, that sort of doom and gloom that was there around the auto industry, the fact that it's not getting any governmental pushes or any benefits from the government, well, it's still pulled up its socks. It's still done what it had to do, and it's on the charge again. I think the industry is putting its best foot forward. Of course, some help from the government would be the greatest thing that it could get at this time to actually bring it back to where it was probably a year and a half ago, where where we saw the graph rising greatly. And I think India has a great opportunity here that shouldn't be missed at this point of time. Khyati told us that in motorsports, we've seen changes coming. So there are changes. We are seeing everything on the move. And I think, Abha, it is 2.0 and we have made a change in this direction.
I'm amazed at the range of topics you all have managed to cover today. And clearly it shows you the direction in which the consumer is also starting to think. You had a whole lot of enthusiasts that have clearly joined in for this chat. I just want to, and Renuka, thank you so much for fielding all those questions so deftly, as you always do.
Anytime.
I just want to touch upon one thing before we wind up. And that's just, as festive season's around the corner and you talked about all these launches, are consumers going to be able to get discounts? Is financing going to be more readily available with interest rates also coming down possibly? I mean, they're already low, but, given that, is this really going to be a good time to buy a car, or should people be holding off? I mean, I know there's no point asking Mr. Modi if people should hold off, but
he's saying no, come into my showrooms.
Yeah. The market has picked up like anything. People are coming. People want a car.
So
I think it's actually
the purchase.
I think it's the rightest time, in my opinion. It's the rightest time to buy a car because there are so many stocks. Dealers are holding cars that they've been wanting to sell for over 3 months that they haven't been able to sell. They're more than happy to give you a good deal on them to be able to, get more cars and newer cars into their showrooms as well, and to be able to sell more. I think manufacturers have also realized at their end that dealers do need some support. They're giving benefits out. They're also trying to move cars because benefits are not coming from government. So manufacturers are putting their best foot forward because they, to put it correctly, have to get the wheels rolling again, whichever way you look at it. So I think it's a great time to buy a car, in my opinion.
So
I actually agree with that. Even I actually bought a car. Sorry, I agree with that. It's a very good time to buy a car. I just bought a car like about 3 weeks back, And the deals that we are getting now are amazing, especially that for usually we buy a used car for a rally car, but this is the first time I'm buying a brand new car.
Awesome. Mr.
Great.
Sanghi, you were saying?
So what I was saying was that the cost of ownership is going to be more almost on a daily basis. And I think we have seen that happening. In spite of a fall in demand, the prices of cars have gone up. So today is definitely going to be the best time to buy. The more you wait, the more expensive your car is going to get.
Yeah. And Abba, I can just say in a post-COVID world, the safest PPE is a car. It's your environment, it's your space, you control it, you manage it. That's the best space you can ever have. It's the ultimate PPE.
Yeah, as regulation changes, as more requirements are needed from manufacturers, you know, come October, we're going to see newer crash regulations also come into space. So manufacturers have to keep improving cars. Their costs are going to increase, as Sanghi sir said. So yeah, I mean, go out and buy a car if you need one now. It really, you couldn't get a better time than now.
Amazing. I have a comment coming in for all of you saying from Divyesh that we'd love to have another auto industry 2.0 discussion. It's been very interesting. So with that, I want to say a very big thank you. I think the questions just kept on coming, but I think we're just about out of time. And I know all of you have had.
Yeah, apologies to those that we couldn't take your questions because we were trying to field as many of them as we could. And I know you had some more. We'll probably try and do this again.
Yes. And thank you all. Vinay, Khyati, Mr. Sanghi, Deepthi, thank you for joining us. Renuka, thank you for moderating.
Always.
And thank you, and Audi Mumbai West for helping us put this together.